get rid of it. That was really scary.
How are you, Salayeh?
I'm really good. The setting all this up is a little bit, you know.
Melinda
Are we,
and Shruti. Yes, so this is Melinda Roy, and so my co-host Shruti. So before you start your presentation, I would like to introduce to the audience who you are. So after that, you can start your presentation. Okay.
okay.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome the incredible Salayeh Self, a dynamic speaker, author, and transformative leader. Salayeh is a beacon of light in the realms of sexuality, trauma, and mindset transformation. With a unique blend of expertise as a creative arts therapist, social worker, and practitioner in various modalities like Tantra, inner child healing, and shame dismantling, Celaya is on a mission to guide individuals towards embodying true intimacy. So, Celaya's coaching goes beyond the surface, delving into crucial aspects of life such as sexuality, relationships, finances, and self worth. Her fearless approach aims to break the chains of shame and trauma, providing individuals with the tools to create a life of self acceptance and fulfillment. So get ready to embark on a transformative journey as Celaya's self takes the stage, offering profound insights and empowering us all to embrace authenticity, personal power, and positive connections. So please join me in welcoming the incredible Celaya self. So that was really a great introduction. Thank you so much for joining this WIN Ideas Pro Summit. So 2024. So you can start your presentation. The stage is all yours. Good luck.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. That's such a lovely introduction, right? Now, um, what am I here for? I suppose I talk about a lot of things that a lot of women are a little bit uncomfortable to talk about. And I kind of go to all those places. And when I say sexual healing and sexual empowerment, I mean about really owning who we are, on a self-worth issue, around embodiment, intimacy, pleasure. And so when I talk about sexual empowerment leading to success, it covers all these different areas. I'm here on a huge mission. I suppose my biggest mission is to open up sexual empowerment and sexual healing centers with a specific focus around sex trafficking. And I have my own personal experiences of why I've gone into this area, and it's something that I care so passionately about. A lot of women in this world hide from pleasure and sexuality and sensuality. We are very much in a man's world, and we are so used to doing instead of being that we actually cut ourselves off from our feminine power. I've got a really beautiful, this is one of my favorite quotes, right? You can't have what you want. However, you can have who you are and what you're willing to tolerate. And for women in this world, it's like we tolerate so much when it comes to disembodying and disconnecting from our highest creativity. So I'm going to do a presentation because I want to just explain this. 1 in 3 women will experience a sexual trauma in their life. And sex trafficking, there's a $150 billion industry, and 79% of those individuals are women and children. And women, 40% of women experience a boundary negligence in their intimate relationships. What I mean by that is from women on a tantric level, we are top down. So we need to feel things emotionally. We need to feel safe in our body to receive pleasure. A lot of our times in our intimate relationships, and as you can see in the world, when we've experienced a sexual trauma, or when we're not safe, or when we're not given time, we don't feel safe. And so a lot of us in relationships, we don't ever talk about sexuality. We don't talk about intimacy. We're not raised by our families and we're spoken to about pleasure. So we kind of get lost in what we as women are here to be. Why is this important? Why is sexuality important? Right, when we're feeling unsafe, and that comes around, as I said, like not embodying our pleasure and our worth in relationships because of the sexual trauma in the world, we are so used to feeling unsafe. We feel unsafe in our bodies. We feel unsafe on how to make money. We feel unsafe in our sexuality, our sensuality. We feel unsafe in how we express ourselves. And we feel unsafe in prioritizing our own needs. So our sexual energy is our creative energy. It's responsible for the relationships we attract, the money we think we're worthy of, the way we love ourselves and care for ourselves, and how we show up in the world. It is everything that a woman possesses is connected to our sexual energy. And when I say sexual energy, again, I'm talking about how we use our voice, how we be. Instead of doing in the world and being in the masculine doing and the left logical brain, I'm on about how we be in this world. And our creative energy is completely connected to that. Sorry about that, I don't know what's going on. And so our sexual energy is completely connected to that. Sexual trauma. When we experience so much trauma, we activate our nervous system. When we activate our sympathetic nervous system, it goes into the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop. And then our blood then just goes to the major parts of the organ and loops in the primitive part of our brain. And we lose verbal narrative. We lose access to parts of the brain that sort of create imagination, hope, and possibility. And if we stay in this primitive part of the brain, we end up just looping and not accessing our creative, sensual, sexual power. When we do this for a long period of time, we end up disembodying from ourselves. And when we're always doing in the masculine and not being in the feminine, we end up being codependent, or we end up sort of manipulating. And a lot of our areas of concern for women is finances. We're so used to losing our power when it comes to money, when it comes to building legacy. And that's because we're kind of being pushed into this world of having to do and having to disconnect from our sort of sensual power, our creative power. And so a lot of women hide from money. They hide from their legacy. They're scared of money. And so when women do that, when we disconnect from our feminine creativity, we can't actually create anything in the world. A lot of women, we're so used to not receiving pleasure and not talking about being in our body. There is so much shame and guilt when it comes towards sexuality and sensuality. We're not sort of shown how to be in relationships, and a lot of the times our generational parents and the generational pass-me-downs, we don't ever really talk about sexuality and sensuality. So then a lot of women end up going through life people-pleasing, disconnecting from their body, disconnecting from their sexual creative energy, where we stop speaking and we stop expressing and we stop being in the world. And we end up doing, as I said before. And when we're doing and we're not in our body, then we can't actually do what we're supposed to be doing in this world, and we can't feel safe. Everything for women is about embodiment, and everything in for women is about feeling safe. As I said, if we can't tap into our body and we can't be, and we're always doing, we can't actually feel safe in our body, and we can't receive pleasure. We can't speak up for ourselves. We can't create. And this is why there is so much shame and guilt when it comes to sexuality and sensuality. So why do I care so passionately about sexuality and sensuality when it comes to our nervous system? So for us, for women, our nervous system is connected to our pleasure nervous system. It's connected to our sex organs, and our sex organs are connected to our throat. And so when we are not safe, when we have not learned to be embodied, when we have learned not to disown our creativity and our sensuality, we can't actually create or bring our legacy into the world. We can't bring money into the world because we don't feel safe. We can't actually create and come from the place of being as a feminine. So this is a really beautiful thing that I want to show you right here. It's quite powerful. So these are some of the nerves that are connected to our sex organs, and they then create safety in our nervous system so that we don't become dysregulated. When we've experienced so much trauma in our life and we are in that trauma response and we're operating in the primitive part of the brain, we become so dysregulated that we actually disconnect from our pleasure zones. When we disconnect from our pleasure zones, we are then dysregulated. So pleasure actually regulates our nervous system. When we are regulated, we can then be in our body and be more embodied. We can be more sensual, and then we can actually operate from the higher parts of our brain where we can have creativity and imagination. So pleasure and creativity is everything for a woman. And when we've experienced a trauma, or when we're in relationships and we don't actually feel safe or take the time to come into our body, we can't actually feel pleasure and we can't feel regulated. These, the pudendal nerve and all of these different nerves, and I'm not going to be able to have time to go into all of this at the moment, but as you can see, all these nerves here are centered around our sex organs, and they create safety for us and they regulate us. So it's really, really important that we learn what pleasure is, and that we learn to receive pleasure, that we learn to take our time and learn to be in our feminine so that we can create from the highest level. It's really, really vital. And my mission is like the amount of women that I speak when I talk about sexuality and sensuality, it's not important. Oh, I don't need to worry about that. And we are so used to being dysregulated that we're always doing. But for women, it's not about doing, it's about being. It's about taking the time to come top down, come into our body, feel things, regulate our nervous system, receive creativity and pleasure so that we can feel calm. So we can feel pleasure, so we can feel as if we're in our body and we're not racing around. And there is so much shame and guilt when it comes to sexuality because of all the systems, because, as I said, because of the sexual trauma, because of the masculine way of doing in this world, we have cut ourselves off so much. So when you realize that pleasure and taking time actually regulates our nervous system, and when we regulate our nervous system, we can create so much more, and we can actually be and do what we're supposed to do, you can see how so vitally important it is for us to be in pleasure. And it's not just about sexual pleasure, it's about embodiment, it's about patience, it's about really listening to our body and coming from a space of flow, not force. If anybody wants this information afterwards, you can I can send that to you. So really what this means for women, when we know that our sexual organs are connected to our nervous system, we can see how important pleasure is for us to create things in this world. Our nervous system is directly connected to our external and internal sex organs. So sexual pleasure actually regulates our nervous system. There is so much shame and guilt in this world, right? So for me, it's like really giving women the voice to be okay with pleasure, because when we do that, we become really, really powerful. So orgasms, they produce histamine, a natural amino acid, and it decreases stress, oxygenates the blood, sends dopamine, and allows us to feel motivated and focused and calm. So an orgasm is really healthy for us. It's really healthy for our emotional, physical, mental, and sexual well-being. And so I'll just leave that there. When we have orgasms, we're more likely to feel content. We're more likely to connect. We've got those really powerful dopamine and oxytocin transmitters going around our body. It sends blood around our body, so we're more oxygenated, so we can feel calmer. So orgasms are really, really important. And when women have had so much shame and we're so disconnected and we're always doing, and we haven't taken the time to come into our body, it can be really, really challenging for us to reach orgasms. But if we learn this and we really do the inner work and we really start to prioritize sensuality as part of our legacy building and money building, we get to realize how powerful that is. Right here is a photo, and I'm not sure if anybody has seen this before, but right here is a photo of our sex organs and our throat. They're really similar, right? There's some beautiful similarities right there. And so when we receive pleasure, when we are in our creative flow, when we're tapped into our body, it's directly connected to our voice. And this is why sexual healing and sexual empowerment is so important, because as women, we are in a world of suppression. We are in a world where we don't know how to express ourselves. And that comes from voicing our needs when it comes to legacy and living in the man-made world and the masculine world, when it comes to owning our pleasure, and when it comes to speaking up for ourselves. If you can't speak as women, if we can't create, if we can't express ourselves, if we can't be in our body, if we can't receive pleasure, we can't express or speak abundance into the world. We just can't bring it in. So this is what I find is so powerful, right? How similar our vocal cords and our sex organs are. They're directly connected. When we make sounds of pleasure and when we laugh, it causes our uterus to respond, like to soften, and it activates a positive hormone like oxytocin. And then we feel more expansive and we're more connected. When we make sounds of, like when they're negative, or when we're crying, or when we've experienced a trauma, a sexual trauma, we get constricted. And our uterus constricts and creates cortisol and adrenaline. So sexual pleasure actually opens our voice organs and opens our voice, opens us and allows us to be more creative, more expressive, and more in our body. So when we are shut down from, as I said, sexual trauma, or when we haven't given ourselves the time in our body and we haven't received pleasure and allowed ourselves to receive pleasure, it actually affects our vocal cords. When it affects our vocal cords, again, we can't speak out into the world. We can't express ourselves. We can't bring in abundance. We can't talk about how powerful we are. We can't create. We can't be in our imagination and really call in what we're here to do as women. We are the most powerful creators in the world because we literally create life. When we stop creativity, we sort of disconnect and disassociate, and we then operate more in the masculine. When women operate more in the masculine, we've got this protective mechanism around us. And again, this stops us experiencing pleasure, and it stops us attuning to ourselves and speaking out abundance in the world. It is so important. We create life. There isn't anything more beautifully creative than us. And it's directly connected to our pleasure zones, which is directly connected to our voice, which is directly connected to how regulated we are in this world. And so if we're not regulated, if we don't feel safe, if we don't receive pleasure, if we don't tap into the higher parts of our brain where the creativity and imagination is, we then operate more in our masculine, and then we do more doing, and we then disconnect and disassociate from our pleasure. So what does this mean for us in this world? It's like, what if we come here to learn, overcome, and offer? And where do we as women really start to prioritize how important our voice is, how important sexual empowerment is, how important it is to find our voice and find different ways of being in this world. When we're operating in our masculine, if we have men operating in this world, and if we have women who are so disconnected and disassociated from their pleasure zones, where they have to allow the masculine of doing to take over to protect ourselves, then we've got women acting as men, we've got men being men, and yet where's the space for the feminine? Where's the space for the intuition and the creativity and the flow and the nurturing and the legacy building from a feminine perspective, which is all about embodiment. It's all about intuition. It's all about softness and flow. Not that we can't be fierce leaders, because as I've said, we are the creators. Like, we create life, we give birth, but it's from a different space. And a lot of that space starts with pleasure and allowing ourselves to receive pleasure. And what do we do when we are in a world where 1 in 3 women will experience a sexual trauma, where 80 to 90% of women and children are trafficked, and it's a $150 billion industry? What do we do when we're not told how to be in relationship, and we're always giving, and we're always people pleasing, and we're always compromising ourselves because we're always doing in the masculine? What do we do then? How do we change this way of being? And so for me, it's a priority. Like, as women, our sexual pleasure and our sensual pleasure should be a priority. you know, and when I say sensual pleasure, it's like dancing, journaling, coming from a space of learning about Tantra. Like Tantra has been one of the most powerful things that I've ever done in my life, because it's a mind, body, spirit with yourselves. We're just in this journey with ourselves. We are here to be in pleasure. We are here to receive money. And when we cut off ourselves, when we disassociate, when we disconnect, when we don't prioritize our sexuality as sensuality, we can't actually bring the money in. And we've been so programmed to think as women that, you know, money is a man's world, or we have to operate like a man in order to get money. But that comes at a cost for women, because a lot of times we disassociate and disconnect from our body. And if we're not shown how to be in relationship, and, you know, as I said, we're not really shown how to be in a relationship. A lot of our parents before us have a lot of shame and guilt, and they don't actually talk about sexuality and sensuality. So then a lot of women go into relationships and they don't prioritize pleasure in their life. And so when we don't prioritize and we rush and we do things from a man's perspective or to please a man, we can't be in our body. For women, when we're in our pleasure, it takes us about 18 minutes to get into our body. And we teach the men and the masculine how to be sexual. We teach men how to be sensual. And so if we've not been shown ourselves, if we've not taken the time to understand what it means to be a female, if we've not learned how to express ourselves and how to speak up for ourselves and how to be in our body, we can't actually, we can't be in truly intimate relationships. Because as I said, it takes us about 18 minutes for women to come down into their body. We need to be emotionally stimulated. We need to be calm. We need to be given the time to come into our body to receive pleasure when we are with our lovers and our partners. And a lot of the times we don't do that. We rush and we people please. And so in the end, we disconnect from our vulva. When we disconnect from our vulva and we don't give ourselves the necessary time to be in our body and pleasure, we continue to traumatize our vulva because we're not listening to our body. When we continue to not listen to our body, and if I talk about intimate relationships, and, you know, forget sexual trauma, but when we don't listen to our body and our vulva, and we don't take the time to receive pleasure, we disconnect. And every time we don't listen to our body and we don't listen to our vulva, our clitoris, our labia, our vulva becomes numb. So that in the end, we can only feel things from hard penetration, or having pleasure is so difficult because we can't give ourselves the time to get in our body, that we end up refusing to have sex, or we end up not prioritizing pleasure because we're not getting a lot of pleasure from it. So everything is connected to sexuality and sensuality. And there is a lot of toxicity in the world from the masculine, right? And that's just because it's lack of education, because a lot of men learn sex education from porn or from their mates. And so we have these two separate worlds of masculine, feminine, sort of just flying blindly about how to be in pleasure, not realizing that when we take the time and we educate ourselves and we really tap into our body and we teach men how to be sexually, then we are creating a completely new way of being and a new world. When we are in our pleasure and we're in control, then we are educating the men in the world how to be safe. When a man is, when women create a safe space for men where they can be sexually embodied and not operating from a lust area, we allow men to access their heart. When we allow men to access their heart, then we don't have the issues that we have in the world, the overrepresentation of, of drugs and alcohol and criminal behavior and toxic behavior of porn and lust. So it's very, very important. And then when women actually start understanding that we are the creators, and that when we actually allow ourselves to feel safe with our pleasure, when we allow ourselves to feel accepting of pleasure, then we really open ourselves up to what we've come here to learn, overcome, and offer. And this is the question I ask when I work with people. It's like the inner work. Sexual healing is about embracing pleasure. It's about doing the inner healing and doing inner child work. It's about learning our patterns from our parents with attachment. It's about learning how we call in money and not being afraid of money, and really calling in our vision upon a vision, like thinking way past and really calling in a big life. Like sexual healing is the entry for feminine leadership. It is where we start. Embodiment, safety, expression, verbalizing, creating, imagining, educating. So it is everything. It is everything. So as I said, if we continue to allow sort of many of the systemic issues, and we continue to allow us as women to keep doing and not taking the time to really understand what it means to be sensual and sexual, we are going to be just in a world full of women trying to be men, and there's no space for the feminine. I am this is my life's work, right? Shame and guilt and owning our pleasure is my life's work. And as women, we need to start having more conversations and more embracing pleasure and being so open about it, and really learning about what it means to be in our body and to be in our pleasure. And to self pleasure, and to know ourselves and be responsible for our own pleasure and not give it away. So I have a program called Red Diamond, and it's called Women Who Dare Are Rare, and it is this beautiful container where we dive into everything, and a lot of trauma work, a lot of shame work, a lot of pleasure, and really understanding what it means to be in your pleasure and to really connect with our body. So if anyone is interested, then please reach out to me. I have something amazing that happened to myself and about 10 powerful women last week. We are in this book, Women of Wisdom, called Queen Bees. And it's 10 authors that are powerfully telling this story. And the proceeds go to Destiny's Rescue that support children from sex slavery. This is something that I care so much about. So I would really appreciate that anyone to buy and share this. As I said, all the proceeds go to Destiny's Rescue to help and support children who have been put into the sex industry. And when we're talking about sexual trauma and all of this, again, we are talking about pleasure in calling out what we want in this world, expressing, verbalizing our needs from all levels, like expressing how we want to be treated in the world, expressing and speaking up for ourselves, calling in legacy and money, expressing and being creative and receiving pleasure. This to me is what divine feminine leadership is all about. And when we have children and women that have been sexually traumatized and they're so disconnected from their body, they can't actually show up in the world. They can't express themselves. They can't speak up for themselves. They can't call in the money or feel worthy of calling in the money, because everything is so cut off and constricted. When we don't have pleasure, it closes down our vocal cords. When we've got constriction in our pleasure zones and our vocal cords, we're dysregulated. And it's that cycle that keeps going and going and going. Thank you so much. And I don't know if anyone's got any questions. I'd love to answer any.
Wonderful speech, the way you connected between the emotional well-being and sexual health, and the key points you have highlighted. And ladies and gentlemen, please contact her on the Red Diamond. Is it the book name is? Sorry, the program name is. Yeah, please do connect to her. Since we are running out of time, our audience have posted the questions in the chat. Can you please respond to that so that they get the answer they're looking for?
Okay, so
You can reply to them while Haley.
Oh, in my own time?
Yes, you can go to.
I can't actually see the messages.
Okay, if you click on the third tab, if you click on the third tab in the vertical chat, if you click on the chat history, after schedule there are three icons. If you click on the third one for the chat, you will be able to see
that one.
Yeah, third one. Okay. Thank you for presenting here on WIN Ideas Pro Summits Virtual Summit 2024, Salayeh. Hope you enjoyed this event and please do join the next sessions. Thank you. So next session, moving on to our next session, it is the Darali session. Please do join that session.